Guided selling from Ring DNA makes your entire sales team more effective by revealing exactly what reps should do and when to do it. Guided selling works by transforming sales data into a curated list of prioritized sales actions. So when reps start their day, they'll never again wonder which prospects and accounts or hot inbound leads to reach out to next. Guided selling even shifts reps' priority in response to real-time buying signals. Finally, even new reps can sell like seasoned ones. Let RingDNA be your guide to success. Learn more at ringdna.com/guided selling. That's ringdna.com/guided selling.
There's just so much constant communication. And, the first thing that I was focused on, of course, was the health and safety of the people on my team. And that inherently wanted me to check in with people constantly, have phone calls, Zoom calls, and also right away establish boundaries like, hey, if you don't feel like showing your face on Zoom, that's fine. If you need to move this one-on-one, all good. If you want to just hop on a call, really give people space. I think that was a really important part of the transition as well.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul, and that was Alex Smith. Alex is the Global Sales Development Manager at Headspace. That's right, Headspace, the mindfulness and meditation app. And I have to admit that until I met Alex, I had never thought about Headspace selling into the enterprise, and that's just what they do. Alex had a very unconventional path to her current position, lots of adventures, many of which we're going to get into. And in retrospect, some of them, like living and working in an ashram, well, they definitely foreshadowed what she's doing today. In fact, Alex did something that I think more sellers should do, which is go out and experience the world before diving into your sales career. Go explore, meet a range of people who aren't like you. And you'll learn how to connect with people with whole different perspectives and experiences. And it'll help you to be more human and to have more interesting conversations with strangers, which is our business. So stick around. This is another great conversation. Before we get to Alex, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. And if you subscribe, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could also give us your feedback about how we're doing in the form of a review. So thank you. All right, let's jump into it. Alex, welcome to the show.
Hey, Andy, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
We're excited to have you here. So where have you been hanging out during all the goings-ons here?
So I actually recently just got back from a trip from Mammoth, and I visited there for the very first time. And it was such a special trip. Camping for a week, no service, trails, hiking, waterfalls. It was incredible. And I definitely needed it too, because I feel like it was the first time that my partner and I can't even remember, have taken a trip just together one-on-one, him and I. So it was definitely very needed and a very successful trip.
Oh, good. Now, did you meet right before the shutdown, or?
Oh, so actually, I met my partner back when I was living in San Francisco, and I was taking some time actually out of being in the corporate sales world. And during that time in San Francisco, I was teaching yoga full time, and I had met my partner through yoga, through one of the other teachers that I worked with, and definitely one of those situations where we meet once, we haven't stopped hanging out, and now we're going on being together for the last 4 years.
Wow. Okay.
I know.
Starting to get serious. I mean, you went on a camping trip.
Hey, everything gets serious during quarantine, I've noticed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, my wife and I noticed that we had never spent that much time together.
I think a lot of
without one of us traveling. Ever since we'd been together. So it was like she had to go back to New York a week ago for her job, and it was like,
yeah. Whoa.
I think maybe we haven't been apart for a long time. So yeah. So we're going to talk about you.
Okay.
and everybody's favorite subject. And I find it really interesting. So you're at Headspace. And for people who don't know Headspace, I mean, it's on my phone. I know it's on millions and millions of phones. So tell people what Headspace is.
Yes. So Headspace is a health and happiness company. And that sounds obviously very broad, but we provide resources and solutions for mental health support, specifically through meditation is what we've been known for. A lot of people don't even realize that Headspace has actually been around for 10 years, but really, mindfulness and meditation and alternative ways of discovering your own healthy habits is one of the reasons why Headspace has become, very popular for people right now, and obviously a really and a very important partner too. That's always available, specifically in some of these most trying times that we're in. But
yeah, I've ramped up my use of it in the last 6 months. I mean, I hate to mention a competitor, but I use both Headspace and Calm.
yeah.
Yeah, I know people swear by them. I remember even before the pandemic, I remember talking to a guy who's a friend. He's president of was VP at a very well-known big tech company, and moved to be president of a startup. And I remember talking to him about, got kids and moving and all this pressure of being a startup. And I said, how do you do it all? He says, 20 minutes a day on Headspace.
Nice. Love to hear that success story. And, there's a lot of other amazing companies that are out there that are very much focused on, the idea of obviously helping people to improve their health and happiness. So I always encourage people to, look around and see what works best for them. But I'm so happy to hear that you did 20 minutes of Headspace. That's great.
Yeah. Well, that was, him. I sort of do 5 minutes at a time. So 5 minutes, sometimes 10-minute meditation. And then one thing I like on Calm is they have these breathing exercises that I really like. But I cycle through those, and the last 6 months have been good times to use them.
Absolutely. And, this is a special time for us as an organization to be supportive to our community members and provide them with other resources and tools in order to help address a lot of the challenges that we're facing in our day-to-day lives right now. And so it's really also even pushed us as an organization outside of the box and thinking of new ways that we can partner with even other amazing people like John Legend, who just started with us.
Name dropping.
Yes, with our new chief, as our new chief music officer, which is incredible. And the focus playlist, right? So there's a little bit of everything for everybody on there. If, meditation is something that, some people maybe are not ready to explore yet, or there's a lot of different types of content that can help you introduce yourself to different ways of thinking and operating.
Yeah, no, I urge people to have these on their phone. But you sell to business though, right?
Yes.
So I found that fascinating as when you and I first met, or I first heard of you, and before we actually had met. And I was like, wait a second, I know Headspace, but they sell to businesses as well. So tell us what you sell to companies.
Yes. Andy, I also had the same reaction to, when I discovered that they had a B2B side of Headspace. That was really interesting to me. When I saw the job posting that they were looking for a sales development manager, I thought, what do they need a sales manager for? I'm already paying for it,
Right.
So of course, I was excited to take the call and learn more about what Headspace was trying to accomplish. And essentially where we are now is, we were like the startup within the startup for a little while. Mm-hmm. And, now we're obviously, excited that we're going to continue to invest resources. But essentially what Headspace is doing now is that we are providing an enterprise mental health solution to organizations to help partner with HR teams to improve the health and happiness of their workforce. And it's customized, it's data-driven. We do leadership workshops. This is obviously all inclusive to, of course, employees having access to Headspace provided by their employer. Mm-hmm. So my team, the sales development function, we are sitting in the UK, we're sitting in North America, And we are continuing to expand, but essentially our role is to introduce this enterprise mental health solution to organizations and to, of course, partner with them and continue to develop our product and enterprise solution.
Interesting. So give us what's the ideal customer profile for you guys on the B2B side?
It's really hard to say right now. If you have a workforce that is in need of any sort of mental health solution, which I believe at this point in time, if you are operating, you qualify. So I think that, we're obviously still figuring out, but we have been very, successful in the organizations that we've been partnering so far with. Like Google is someone that we have partnered with. And as far as the ideal customer profile, it really just depends on what the organizational needs are. But at this point in time, we're really kind of still figuring it out. Of course, we have some strategic ideas that we think would be great with certain organizations, but it's a little too early to tell. And the great thing about mental health is it doesn't discriminate. There's not like a one size shoe fits all or a profile for people who qualify for something like this. It is literally for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, and not because this is a sales podcast, but I would think I've been on this kick for a while. Is I think any organization with a sizable sales organization would be an ideal prospect for this. Because you ever watch the show Billions?
No, I've never seen it before, but I have heard of it.
So about a hedge fund, high pressure trading environment, and one of the key employees is an on-staff psychiatrist, mental health professional. That when the traders hit a slump, when they're, personal doubts, lose their confidence, whatever, go have a consultation in the office. I'm like, and you see this on sports teams, right? Professional sports teams. They've got staff, psychologists and, sports psychologists and so on. And these are all performance-based organizations. And so sales is a performance-based profession. And yet we spend so little time focused on that aspect of it, the mental health and the mindsets and so on.
Definitely. I would say that Headspace is definitely very appealing to that particular part of the organization. I mean, I know from firsthand having a career in sales that this is something that no doubt a lot of the, stereotypes that you would think about when you think of sales organizations could absolutely use a dose of a break, meditation, mindfulness, pausing, because, if you work in sales, your time is money, money's time. You're on the clock, you're grinding, you're doing what you need to do to get to where you need to go. And oftentimes everything else falls on the second and third and fourth priority after, hitting your goals. So I definitely hear you on that. And I do think that this is attractive to sales organizations. And that was a no-brainer when I first joined the team. I thought that was a huge opportunity. And then, of course, being in this position, I've been able to learn so much more about all the other departments that also receive a tremendous amount of stress in the type of work that they do.
Well, and I think obviously it's magnified during the shutdown period.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you've experienced it. I've experienced it. I mean, I look at my wife's work where, she's basically 8 to 5 on Zoom, which is just nuts, right? Because every little,
definitely,
I used to pass you in a hallway, exchange has now become a scheduled Zoom meeting. And and I think just in general in America, we're famous worldwide for being obsessed with work.
Absolutely. I think that rings true. I, took some time away from the corporate world and I traveled abroad for a year solo by myself in South America and visited Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina, Chile, Peru, and Colombia. And when you travel and you spend that kind of time away from America, you learn very quickly the things that are part of our culture that are not necessarily normal or other ways. Essentially, you learn that there's actually other ways to operate. But to your point, it's just very much embedded in our culture in America.
Yeah, well, I think you learn other places that happiness is not based on possessions.
No doubt about that. It's a connection, experience, joy, and moving at a slower pace so we don't miss the moment and we're present with the people that we love and the things that we're doing. And it's so interesting because I'm sure that we can all, think of a time, if not literally 10 minutes ago, where we might be multitasking and we're not as present in that one-on-one with that person we're talking to, or that scheduled Zoom call that you've been on for, 8 hours. So it's just something interesting that we learn.
So, question for you then with your team. Well, first of all, like roughly how big is your team?
Oh, my team is so teeny tiny right now. I have 5 people on my team.
And I take it when the shutdown happened, everybody's working from home. How'd that go for you?
So it definitely brought us so much closer. And this was one of those moments where I was actually thankful. I'm used to, at some of the organizations I've worked at, I've managed 20 SDRs. And we had, 11 SDR teams globally. And so that type of demand to do remotely would have been so much scarier than obviously what is being managed right now with my team at Headspace. And so, in the beginning, there's just so much constant communication. And, the first thing that I was focused on, of course, was the health and safety of the people on my team. And that inherently wanted me to, check in with people constantly, have phone calls, Zoom calls, and also right away establish boundaries like, hey, if you don't feel like showing your face on Zoom, that's fine. If you need to move this one-on-one, all good. If you want to just hop on a call, like really give people space. I think that was a really important part of the transition as well, is giving people space to be able to get themselves set up in a place where they feel like they can succeed and they're in a headspace, quote unquote. That's also very positive as well. And that is a process. And they talk a lot about, everything that's been happening with COVID. And I can relate it to the stages of grief. In the beginning, it was, absolute chaos, and then anger, and then, acceptance and frustration. You just go through these different phases. And I felt like we were all going through that together. And so I have really focused so much more on just the people part of the job. And when I focused on that, we were able to, for sure, navigate the rest of the stuff. That's, work in some sense almost felt like a safety net. Not to say that it was easy, but there were so many other hard things that were going on externally that I felt like that was the most important place for me to support and focus.
And so your customers during this time, interest is like, is this, something you could think, well, okay, this is kind of discretionary, maybe not top priority, or have they said, no, actually, we're pretty aware of what's going on with our people, that actually having a resource like this and offering this type of resource to our employees is actually more urgent now than it was, back in January.
Absolutely. For the people that reached out to us for support during this time, they were absolutely looking for ways in which that they can support their employee population. And of course, we were incredibly grateful to be, what we would consider almost a first responder when things really started to, get a bit more challenging those first couple weeks of March when everything started to shut down. And so the conversations that we're having with people are very real because they're about people's health and people's safety. And also with a lot of companies, having to do furloughs and layoffs, like we are there to support them in all of these really challenging decisions or tough conversations that they're facing with the people that they're, essentially, providing for. So it was incredibly humbling, and it was also very therapeutic to connect with strangers over the phone too, when people were also so scared that they were, like, when are we ever going to go out again? So we would get on the phone with some of these strangers and have these very vulnerable conversations. And I just thought it was such a special moment to meet other people in.
So getting on the phone with customers or prospective customers?
Both. And when I say, members is how we refer to the people who are onboarded our Headspace for Work products. But I would say prospects, customers, people in general.
Interesting. So do you prescribe for companies, when they buy subscription, do you also have like, hey, here's how we suggest you use it. Here's a program to follow. Here's how you can roll this out to your employees. How do you onboard people internally in something like this that, is not like, hey, it's not like a CRM system where you got to use it for your job. Right. It's like I don't call it a perk, but it's, You know what I mean? It's so how do you help the people, the companies that purchase this from you? How do you help them, I said, onboard their own people?
That's always, something that our company is working on as far as like adoption and engagement and education. That's very much where I would say, customer success side of initiatives, come from when we do onboard someone who's purchased our Headspace for Work enterprise solution. So, but to your point, yes, we put together a rollout plan, and of course we have to partner with these organizations and how, in which, and the ways in which they roll out communication to their employees. And so we work with them to design a plan and a launch. And a lot of times we have found that organizations tend to really be open to rolling something like this out, or maybe already have it in their mind as an initiative they want to do for a particular time. For example, World Mental Health Day, that's coming up on October 10th. This is a great time to be talking about mental health. And when you have these days or times where we take time to recognize a portion of how this can be beneficial to people, I think people see a nice value in doing that simultaneously. And so, long story short, it's customizable. Of course, we do emails and newsletters and webinars and all that good stuff. But it's very much the partnership with the specific organization we're working with.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, as I said before at the top, especially in sales, I know corporate wide, but in sales, salespeople need to do a better job of paying attention to it just bit by bit. We're seeing on LinkedIn and other forums where now people are, quite frankly, having the courage to sort of stand up and tell their stories.
Yes.
And we just need more of that, but also provide more resources for people. And I think this is, to the example I gave before, is, I firmly believe that any sizable sales organization, maybe 100 sellers or 200 sellers, I don't know the exact number is, at least on an outsourced basis, you should have access to that type of mental health support, because it is, in sales, all jobs are stressful, but this is extremely stressful work. We compound by what's going on today, and we expect people to be at their best when they've got kids at home and all these other things that are going on, fear of getting sick, and we don't provide any support for them. And
definitely,
again, this is such a stressful role. Managers, if you're listening, there are resources like Headspace and others, but pay attention to your people, because they find it extremely hard to talk about. And that's why I applaud the people who do speak about it, like Richard Harris, who talks about it online and LinkedIn a lot. And, this should be part of the standard package at all times, not just during a pandemic, for, I said, sales organizations of a certain size, and for smaller ones, they're, on-demand resources and so on. It's just got to make sure people understand that's available and to take advantage of it. And that's not, they're not looked down on for wanting to do that.
Absolutely. I think that, just how we look at acquiring another sales tool to help our sales people be more efficient from a metrics standard, we have to be looking at that this is a human being, and what else more can we be giving to this person that's not so tactical, that's going to put this person in the best place to succeed. And I think that the challenge right now is twofold. And you touched on this, but just want to highlight the fact that there's a lot of education and learning that still needs to happen first. And then, of course, in conjunction with that, there needs to be access to these type of resources. And those are the two biggest barriers that we're trying to provide people. And I think just meditation and mindfulness in relation to workplaces in general is the conversations that, we're having. And leaders now more than ever have a responsibility to address and support people in these areas, but they don't necessarily know how, right? Which is the education part that we're solving for. And then the access, it's like, okay, well, what are the resources? And so that's part of it. But it definitely starts with the conversation, awareness, right? And the education and building the access.
No matter where your sales team is working from, Ring DNA can enable them to be more productive and effective. RingDNA offers a complete platform for remote sales teams that gives reps the tools they need to connect with more prospects and create more opportunities and drive more revenue no matter where they're working from. And managers can get real-time insight they need to coach reps to success. Win more deals from anywhere on the planet with RingDNA. Learn more about how RingDNA helps remote teams at ringdna.com/remote work. That's ringdna.com/remote work. Well, and I think part of it requires, culture changes in many organizations from, oftentimes in sales is, any sign of weakness is like blood in the water for sharks, and you're looked at as being less than. And I know that's not exclusively in sales, but, that's what we're talking about here is, and, as leaders, you have to make that change. You have to make it available to your people, these resources available to your people. You have to be in a position to have these conversations where people feel empowered to be vulnerable about what's going on and help them.
Absolutely. And that goes back to, what we really just talked about, which I would love to expand on, is that the responsibility of the leader. This is a time more so than ever that if you're in a manager or leadership position, that you're probably having conversations with yourself in the mirror, hopefully, that you've never had before, and asking and challenging yourself, yes, in a way where you have to do different things to put yourself in a way where you can be supporting others to the best ability. And being open to these type of things, was kind of once a choice. And now I would say it's an absolute necessity and a requirement if you're going to continue to lead people through this time.
I agree. But I think that the problem is, and I've talked about this often in this program, is that it's the way we structure sales in most large organizations and even smaller ones. But we assume that because somebody has risen to the level of CRO or VP of sales or what have you, is that they are somehow magically imbued with all these qualities, right? That they are not just a sales expert, they're a human development expert, they're a human potential and performance expert, that they know how to motivate people, they know how to, and that's unfair. They haven't been trained on any of that. Now, ego-wise, they may think they're really good at it, but they're not.
Yeah.
Right? And you look at other performance-based organizations, and I oftentimes talk about professional soccer because I love professional soccer, is, their staffs are full of specialists in various levels, aspects of performance. And, mental health being one of them. We're in a performance business, people. We want people to perform better, is we need to give them the resources, and we need to enable them to operate in an environment that's not driven by fear. And that's what starts at the top is, leaders at the top feel they can't admit they need help.
That
because
is a huge
they'd be
one.
perceived to be weak. And then it filters on down the chain. Everybody's afraid to say anything because, I'll be perceived to be weak, or they think I don't know something. And so we run this whole business from a perspective of fear as opposed to having this open mindset, a growth mindset, even though people claim they have it. But you really don't have a growth mindset if you can't support people who have, challenges on mental health issues, oftentimes caused by stress at work.
Definitely. And I think I just think the level of fear that people have is due to their lack of awareness. And what exercises are people doing to cultivate more awareness in the situation so that way we can act and respond accordingly? And also, it's okay, to show the emotional side. I feel like that's been a superpower of mine in my management. And it's, I guess, one of those things like I can't help but to be my authentic self if we're spending that much time together. But that is something that I've gained more respect for throughout my personal and professional career development than anything else, is just being raw and letting people know for sure when I don't know something, but I will absolutely, it's all about follow-up, right? It's like who's supposed to know anything or everything for that matter? So I think that there's a lot of different factors that come into play when we're considering like, why leaders haven't necessarily, made this change for themselves. And for sure, it's always going to be hard to steer the ship for other people if our leaders aren't invested in making those changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So here's a question for you.
All right.
You lived in an ashram.
Yes, I did.
So that's fascinating. So tell us about that. When, what stage in your career did you do that? And where was it? And I'm very fascinated by that.
I would be happy to elaborate on that for you. So I'll back it up just a little bit because I think the context before is really important. So my first sales job was in New York City and had the opportunity. It was really low paying, but like could have, uncapped commission situation, but it was definitely my ticket out of Florida. So I took it and
well, yeah. Get out of Alabama.
Yes, that too as well. So I felt.
And what were you selling?
So it was called Single Platform. They were basically the first people to put menus on the internet. So if you wanted anything other than your name, address, and phone number when you're a restaurant or a small business, you would essentially pay Single Platform a subscription fee to have your information listed anywhere, and you could update it whenever you wanted. And it was right place, right time. And it was a startup, and I was one of their first, sales hires. And then the company got acquired. We started hiring 10 people per month. 120 person sales floor, super duper competitive. I was a full cycle AE. They didn't have SDRs back then. I was the SDR, I was the AE, I was the marketing manager, I was the customer success. Yes. 100 cold calls today. And I was in the top 3% consistently, quarter over quarter, had the opportunity to become a part of the management team, did that for them for 2 years. But truly, Andy, I don't come from money. This was like the first time that I have ever made money, seen money. I didn't even know what to do with it, but I knew that I didn't want to go to another brunch or go like out shopping in Soho for Saturday after Saturday. And
yes,
I quickly realized, that I was definitely searching for more. I'd also just developed a really unhealthy work-life balance, which is a whole nother story. But long story short, after that trip, I basically quit my job, sold my things, had an eat, love, pray moment, and went and bought a one-way ticket to Brazil. And
all right, so why Brazil?
So funny story. I had gone to Brazil about 6 months prior to deciding that I was going to quit my job, plan, do my thing. And I had such an adventurous friend in New York, born and raised in Manhattan, totally pushed me outside my comfort zone all the time. And, her and I think we made like one of our first commission checks that we were very proud of. We were both working in sales. And she said, let's close our eyes and pick a place on the map and let's go travel. Let's celebrate. And I thought, oh God, that's so wild, but let's do it. And the place that we picked was Brazil. And then we went to Brazil for 3 weeks. I came back from that particular first trip and said, wow, there is more to life. I want to explore that. If I've got money, like that's what I want to use it on. I want to live. I want to explore. I want to learn another language. And then that's really what prompted the trip. So I obviously planned. No one saw me for like months. Of course, parents didn't talk to me for a couple of weeks.
Yeah. So you just quit your job.
Yes.
And hopped on a plane to Rio or Sao Paulo.
That's right.
Just by yourself.
Well,
right?
I started off at Carnival with 5 of my friends.
Okay.
And we traveled together for 2 weeks in Brazil. And then people kind of left me on my journey, which was when the deep, scary, awesome, exciting work started to happen. And I felt like there was massive transformation happening month after month after month. I was just transforming into a different person.
Well, what was doing that?
Definitely confronting fear, death, anxiety, being overwhelmed, body issues. I mean, you name it, safety, right? Being a female on my own, traveling, not knowing the language. Probably some of the biggest fears that, a lot of people haven't stepped into, a lot of unknown, and a lot of unknown obviously causes fears, but I've really learned to actually seek the unknown now. And it's not so scary anymore, which is why when I got back from that trip and I came back to the States, I had a moment when I was in Peru. I stayed at a meditation house in the Sacred Valley for 10 days. And I thought, oh my God, how do I feel like this all the time? What is happening here? I just made a promise when I got back to the States that I was going to really learn so much more about breath work, yoga, meditation, and see where it comes from. And did a ton of research. So long story short, I got back to the States and I decided New York wasn't the place for me anymore. I had just a little bit of money left. And so I went to San Francisco. And at the time I was interviewing with different corporate companies, not feeling it at all. But very passionate about this yoga, meditation, breath work. San Francisco is a hot spot for a lot of different type of practices under those genres. And so, but I was really looking for a very authentic experience. And so I found this ashram called the Yoga Society of San Francisco. And I met the teacher there. His name is Buddhik Shah. And I had an overwhelming amount of emotion meeting him and just it feeling like this is the person that I want to learn from. And he also took a very particular interest in what I was trying to accomplish and he just looked at me and knew I was doing some soul searching. And really,
well, at that point, let me interject.
Yeah,
at that point,
please.
Did you have a goal in mind?
Well, I wanted to get my yoga teacher training. I did. I wanted to get my yoga teacher training, learn it more. And then for the most part, I wanted to teach. That wasn't right away. It was more so I wanted to just learn it. But I love to teach. And anything that I love, I inevitably end up teaching to other people because I'm obviously such a big advocate for things I love.
But at that point, were you thinking, I'll find my way back to business at some point or to sales? But
yes.
Was that in the back of your mind? Or was it like, no, I'm on this journey and I don't know how it's going to turn out?
So while this was all happening, I really started to love this studio in San Francisco called Ritual Hot Yoga. I ended up hanging out there all the time, becoming friends with the teachers, became really good friends with the owner, Lindsay. And she learned about my background. She learned about what I am doing or trying to do at the current time. And she said, I could really use your help. Like, I'm trying to grow this business. I want it to be the soul cycle of yoga. I want to grow multiple locations. Like, will you come on full time with me to be a business development manager and open a couple locations? And I'll sponsor your yoga certification. You can teach and do whatever journey you're doing right now. And, and at the time that was a easy yes for me. But when you talk about, I probably took a 70% pay cut from what I was doing in tech. So I had a completely different lifestyle change for a couple of years as well. And being in the Bay Area, doing the reverse, and it's really interesting to see the way that people treat you too. That's a whole other thing.
When you're not making money.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Or when you're not working in tech or talking about tech.
Yeah. 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 Well, so based on that experience then, it seems very logical that you ended up at Headspace.
Very serendipitous. Things work out. And at the time, it got to the point where, I had swung the pendulum all the way, the mental health way, full-time yoga, decided it wasn't going to be me for long term, but it's obviously a part of me and a part of my life forever. I had done this self-work, right? For the last 3 years, traveling, learning about yoga, living in this ashram, teaching and living a completely different lifestyle. I was so eager to actually go back into the business world. It's just so interesting the way that we change, right? I was so stubborn before. And then 2.5 years later, I was like, I have things to give other people. I would love to go back to sales. I love sales. I love working on commission and being in control of, what happens and how much I get paid based off of my performance. And so I was so excited, but I was interviewing. I was still teaching yoga full time for 6 months. And it was so interesting because some people thought that maybe I all of a sudden, wouldn't be qualified to do a similar job as what I was doing before I was doing yoga because I took time to do it. So
yeah, the world has changed so much in those 2 years.
Yes.
Yes, I know.
And then Flexport was the company that I actually moved to LA with. So in San Francisco, found Flexport. They reached out. They loved my background. They loved the fact that I took this time off. They were looking to hire their first sales dev manager. And they said that, they were growing really fast. They're probably going to have 10 teams in the next year. And I thought, wow, this is such a great opportunity. And it ended up being a great fit. And so I moved down to LA to open up their LA office and run their sales dev team down here, and then expanded it to 6 other offices. And so that was before Headspace. And then
before Headspace.
Mm-hmm. And, I had a really interesting experience there. Logistics, nothing is more complicated than that. Especially selling it. I definitely felt like there were times though that I was sitting in the room with some of the smartest people I have ever met in my entire lifetime. And
great room to be in.
Definitely. And it got my operations muscle super strong. So, and I have a really heavy, in conjunction with sales enablement, I am very deep in data and operations and savvy in that area, which I think is another superpower.
Right.
But Headspace had ended up actually reaching out to me through a mutual connection of someone I used to work with in New York 8 years prior. So never underestimate your network or people that you work with or the reputations that you build. Even if it's the worst experience, try to do your best job. Other people will remember you for that.
Well, yeah. Well, I think it's fascinating. And I think that either as if you're listening to this as an individual contributor or as a hiring manager, is, for me, the key lesson, and I, as much as possible, try to do this, is bring people in who have this diversity of experiences and into your sales team. Not just, don't hire guys like me who went to college and went right into sales, but people that went out and experienced something. And even if they took a break in their career, I mean, remember once hired a guy who drove a bread delivery truck.
Love it.
Right? Yeah. I mean, and he had a fabulous career. He was excellent at it, at sales. I mean, other people with diverse backgrounds. I've always wanted people who had that different perspective. I hired a lot of people from engineering into sales. People that you'd think you met them, traditional salesperson. Oh, they don't have the personality, blah, the sales DNA, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And these people just crushed it, right? Because they had these different experiences. They related to people in a different way. Customers loved them, and we just need to increase our commitment to bringing more diversity into sales because it works.
Yes.
I mean, it's not an obligation. It works. You want, part of the reason we perform at sort of consistently low levels in many industries and sales is there's no diversity of opinion about we should be doing it differently.
That's right.
Right. Everybody's operating in lockstep.
Absolutely. And I think that you made a really good point when you were talking about that specifically. And I just think that, again, why do we think that way? And I find myself like, how am I a unicorn that I want to build the most diverse and inclusive team? Like seems to be something that that is one of my number one purposes and responsibility as a leader is to do that. And I think about that every single day. And I thought about that even before, obviously, a lot of things have become awakenings for people within the last couple of months with everything that's been going on. And it's so important. And that's why I love the sales development function so much. It's expected that I'm not going to hire people based off their 7 years of experience. Like, I am looking for straight up potential, character, hunger, drive, and, obviously a working relationship. Partnership. And I think about this all the time. And it still is obviously so surprising. The teams that I've run have been the most diverse teams within a lot of the tech organizations that I've worked for. And I recognize that that's a problem. And don't get me wrong, there's definitely so much more that I can do, that we can do to continue to build upon that. But I want to see that running through the veins of sales organizations. We're so guilty of that.
Yeah. Yes. In 20 words or less. Yes. I saw a stat recently. Let's see. I think I have it here. 78% of people working in sales in the US are white, and 61% of those are male. So, you do the math. It's like, white men who make up 30% of the U.S. population hold over half the sales jobs.
Yes, and I bet that's even scarier when you get to the sales leadership level. But that's another conversation for another time. But
absolutely.
It's not surprising to me at all. But I also learned this game from men, and I have them to thank for that. However, again, paying it forward, I just really hope that we can empower more leaders to be focused on building diverse and inclusive things and giving access to the opportunities to people of color and to women. And that should be a priority. And I think but also there needs to be a lot of partnership from organizations, right? I think that some organizations that are scaling really quickly, like we used to have hiring deadlines, right? When we were scaling at one of the organizations I was at, and what do you do when you're in that kind of position when you want to wait, for, a diverse set of candidates to be able to make this decision, but, then you're on these deadlines and that your whole existence as a manager is tied to that in some sort of way. Like there has to be alignment that that's not the right way to approach hiring.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Alex, we've run out of time, but it's been great speaking with you.
Yes. Thank you so much. This was a great chat.
So how can people connect with you if they want to learn more about your story and what you're doing at Headspace?
The best way to connect with me, stay connected with me, is on LinkedIn. And I'm trying to grow my professional network on there. So I, of course, would love to hear from you, comments, DM, or if you have any fun projects that you're looking for, or you want to talk a little bit more about mental health or how you can even talk about your own or your workplace, I'd be happy to support.
Perfect. All right.
Awesome.
Alex, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. As always, I'm so grateful for your support of the show. And I want to thank my guest, Alex Smith, for sharing her insights and her journey with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you could also leave us a rating or a review, let us know how we're doing, well, we'd certainly appreciate that. You can do all that on your phone in less than a minute as soon as this episode is over. So thank you for your help. And as always, thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.